Her Hardest Duty by Alchemystudent. Twilight Sparkle breathed deeply as she walked around her room. Today is the day, isn't it, when I have to see off one of the last of my friends. She lowered her head at the thought of the day's events. This was a hard task that she had ahead of herself today, and she knew that it would never be an easy one to do. It was never easy. She walked by her nightstand to look at an old photograph of her and her friends, the same one that they took on the first day that they had all become friends and her mentor sent her to live in Ponyville. Tears welled up in her eyes as the memories came to her of all the things that she and her friends did together, the lives that they had lived, and the journeys that they had been on. She looked over some of the other photos on her stand, each one of them a precious memory of her friends together. The day they beat Discord, her brother's wedding, her coronation, saving Rarity from being a nightmare, their journey to the Dragon Lands, and meeting the Dragon God. Dash and Flutter. She looked away a bit from that picture. All it did was remind her of the hard task that was set before her. It was a very hard task for her, one that she thought would become easier with each time and each friend that went. But it never got easier, did it? It only got harder and harder each time I did this. She looked back at the photo of her two friends, both looking so happy in it. Sighing at the thought, they looked happy on that fateful day too. Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy were the first to go, to the surprise of no one. Ever since they rekindled their friendship, they became closer and closer to one another. So when the fateful day had come, it was not so shocking that they went together as one. Fluttershy looked so happy there, surrounded by her animals and Mom and Dad, while Dash looked confident as always. Rarity did the best job she could to make sure that they looked so alive on that day, while every pony else noticed that this would be the first time that Dash had ever dressed up for anything in her life. A tear came to Twilight's eyes as she remembered her trying her best not to break down in tears on that day alongside Rarity and Pinkie. "Hey, Twilight, it's time!" Spike called from downstairs, looking up to her room. "You do remember what day it is, right?" "Yes, Spike," Twilight sighed. "I do. I was just remembering." "Oh," Spike said, walking away slowly and understanding. "Just try not to be late, okay?" Twilight looked down the stairs and replied, "I've done this 3 times already, Spike. I think I know when to come so I cannot be late." She then shot out her wings in the sudden realization. She had done this 3 times, seen this type of thing 3 times now, and now it was Pinkie's turn. Closing her wings against her side, she sighed softly. She knew that the day that she had reached her final stage in her development and became a princess, that this type of day would come. That she would soon see each one of her friends go through this, and she would have to watch them each and every time. It was one of her duties, after all, one that she specifically asked Celestia for. It was a duty that she knew her friends would want and would be honored to have her do for them and their families in the future. She looked down the stairs to where Spike was and softly smiled. Pinkie was the second to go, and she knew that one day it would be Spike's turn as well. Dragons aren't eternal, after all. One day he will grow up, and she put a hoof to her mouth. "Oh, Celestia, if I'm getting this worked up for Pinkie, then what is going to happen with Spike? Can I actually do it for him?" She looked back down before teleporting. She loved Spike like a son, and she knew that when his time came, she might just break. She teleported to the inside of the chapel, in a long hallway surrounded by the stained glass windows. A smile came across her face as she looked at one, depicting her and her friends saving the day from an evil god from the old days that wanted to wipe out all will. Looking along the glass, she could remember that each friend that stood beside her, and then when she reached Applejack, she remembered Applejack's day. For Applejack, it was as simple and down-to-earth. Well, as simple as it could be when you were doing it outside, and the party contained almost every Apple family member in existence. She chuckled as she remembered how tired Derpy was in spreading the news to every member and how loud the party was. Her face then turned somber when she remembered Applejack being brought in, how beautiful she looked on that day, and how every pony there was in tears as they saw her. Twilight herself couldn't believe it when she had heard the news. It was just so shocking to hear. Then she saw Applejack and was able to confirm it, that it was all true. She shook her head in order to clear the memory, trying her best not to dwell on how she did it in the past, or how hard it was going to be each time that the moment arrived. However, the memories kept on coming as she looked through the hallway. It was a reminder to her of the royal chapel that was used on Rarity's Day, the chapel that she had asked and begged Twilight to give her the chance to use. Only Rarity, she chuckled to herself as she walked down the hall. Only Rarity would beg for her own chapel and design her own dress for that day. She then looked down, thinking that Rarity was the last before Pinkie Pie, and never had a chance to make a similar gown for her pink friend. I bet she would have loved the chance to make a. She was taken out of her thoughts by a weight of an armored white hoof on her shoulder. "It never does get easier, does it, my faithful student?" Celestia asked, looking down at her Twilight. "No," Twilight sighed. "It doesn't. I thought it would after time, but the responsibility that this keeps bringing, the fear that I might mess something up, it just keeps getting worse." Celestia smiled warmly at her former student as she looked into her eyes. "I know, Twilight, I know. I personally have watched over several of my own friends' ceremonies, and it never gotten easier. Even I came close to messing it up one time, but luckily Luna was there to help me from ruining it. It's just so nerve-wracking each time," Twilight said, flying up to an image of her brother putting a hoof. "I mean, I've already been through this with 4 of my friends by now. How much longer before I have to do this for their children, grandchildren, or any of my nieces and nephews?" She then floated back down to Celestia's level. "It just becomes harder and harder to do it each time and to make sure that it's all perfect for them." "Isn't that why you wanted this duty, though?" Celestia asked, running her hoof in a comforting manner along Twilight's mane. "The moment that you heard this was one of your duties as a princess, you came and almost begged me for the chance to watch over all your friends and family when this day finally came for them, because you wanted to make sure that it was special for them, and you wanted to be a part of that." Twilight giggled a little as Celestia's hoof reached a wing, tickling her. "You're right, Celestia. I did choose this, and I have to do it, no matter how hard it gets," she said, her eyes giving a look of determination. "Oh, and your brother is here today. Apparently you might want to get ready for your other duty soon enough," Celestia said as she decided to go and watch from afar as another element bearer went through the next stage in their life. Sighing, Twilight walked slowly to the front of the chapel, and in front of so many ponies, all of them friends and family of Pinkie Pie, all of them connected to her in some way. Twilight looked along at the cakes, now older than she had first saw them, crying their eyes out for their adoptive daughter, right along Pinkie's real parents. She looked at the Cake twins, now teenagers, looking at the ceremony, thinking of their older sister. She then turned to the 4 ladies standing by her side, their colors striking the right mood for the occasion that was transpiring. Turning to look straight ahead, she got a good glimpse of Pinkie as the music began to play through the chapel. Twilight kept a very stoic face as Pinkie was carried down the path where Twilight stood. She sighed. The mare had gotten a bit older with time, and now she was before her, looking no different than the first day they'd saw her. Twilight took a deep breath and began to speak. "Friends and family, I'm glad that we are all gathered here today to see Pinkamena Diane Pie." Pinkie looked up from her from under the veil. "Twilight! I thought you said you were going to call me Pinkie. You don't need to be so formal." The guests in the chapel just looked on in shock that Pinkie could be so brazen during her wedding, while Twilight chuckled. "I am sorry. Gathered here today to see my dear friend Pinkie Pie, to be joined in holy matrimony." As Twilight went on through the ceremony, Rarity looked down at her stomach. "Now you see, darling, that is not how you're going to act. Understand?" Applejack looked at Rarity with an unbelieving look. "I swear, Rare, it can't hear you from over here." "Oh, and you never talked to your first foal?" Rarity asked Applejack. Twilight could overhear her longtime friends talking up a storm under their breaths. They had both gotten pregnant around the same time and have since been trying to give each other advice. Pinkie and Brayburn met each other through a mutual love of bakery, and that soon... "Does she have to do this with every wedding?" Dash asked. "Come on, just say, 'I pronounce you Mare and Stallion,' and be done with it." Fluttershy said nothing in response as she looked down at her wedding band around her puff and back to Rainbow Dash, a smile on her face. She turned to watch the small show to her right as Rarity and Applejack continued their small argument. Now, by the power invested in me, I now pronounce you stallion and mare. You may kiss the bride." "At last!" Pinky exclaimed as she tackled Brayburn to the ground and gave him a deep kiss. It was all Twilight could do to stop herself from chuckling. At the reception, Twilight sat at a table close by her friends and drinking her tea. "Are you sure you're okay with Pinky wearing that dress, Rarity?" "Oh, of course, darling," Rarity said, watching Pinky dance in her spotlight dance. "I have to admit, her idea was very creative." Twilight smiled, remembering the day that Pinky broke the news and how she told Rarity that Pinky's mother wanted to make the dress. Rarity felt a little disappointed that she couldn't make all of her friends' wedding dresses. Luckily, Pinky had a great idea. She was going to combine both dresses into one. It was quite a sight. It was so Pinky. Out of the corner of Twilight's eye, she caught Rarity's husband talking, and that began to bring back memories of the adventure that they had to save him from before the wedding. "Oh, how are you holding up, Sugar Cube? Still thinking this was hard?" Applejack asked, her belly wobbling a little. "No, not at all. At least compared to yours. I never realized you were going to invite the entire family here, or that every one was going to wish you well." She then looked at her belly, reminded of the foal. "So how is it?" "Ah, he's doing fine. Rarity's been making sure that I take good care of it." Applejack chuckled as she drank a little cider. She and Rarity had gotten pregnant around the same time and were due around the same date. "Look, it's my first, so I wanted to make sure that I have a good friend who has been through it before, keeping me in check and making sure I don't scream anything unladylike." This caused the table to laugh. Dash looked at the party pony who was waving her hoof to her blue friend to come to her. Dash looked and gave a quick kiss on the lips to Fluttershy, a smile on her lips. Being the first to get married also meant that she had a perfect marriage routine with Pinkie Pie that she had been doing the past few times. Getting a small party cannon on her back, Dash smirked as she took off and fired it in mid-flight. This sent out fireworks that lit up the night sky. Twilight sat back and watched it all, a smile on her face as she breathed a sigh of relief. She had accomplished her hardest duty, one that she wanted to do since she found out about it, the hardest duty of helping her friends grow and go on to a new journey of their lives.